Welcome to the Embodiment Matters podcast with me, Erin Giesemann Rabke, and my beloved Carl Rabke. We don't have the luxury of living in ordinary times, but rather we live in extraordinary ones where the way we live in the next decade will make a huge difference in the future of life on planet Earth. We aspire in this tapestry of rich conversations drawn from a variety of wise perspectives to share resources to help you embody the wisdom, compassion, and skillful actions that are needed during these times. You can find out more about our classes and sign up for our newsletter at embodimentmatters.com. You can also become a supporting member of our podcast with a small monthly donation. Look for Embodiment Matters at patreon.com. Hello, friends. It's Erin here. I'm really happy to share this podcast episode with you. I had a conversation with my dear beloved friend, Leilani Navar, and we recorded it so we could invite you into this conversation with us. Leilani and I have been dear friends for about 10 years when our sons, who were 4 and 5 at the time, met in a public place as they were playing dinosaurs together. And then we followed our kiddos and figured out who the parents were and became such deep and fast friends and have been in shared inquiry and deep conversation about how we want to live and what matters during these times. And out of this deep friendship and this deep care about how we show up in the world and how we're showing up to participate with heart and with compassion and with courage, even during these bizarro times we're living in, we decided to offer a few online gathering opportunities. And we're doing 3 Sundays starting very soon, November 3rd, November 10th, and November 17th of 2024. We recorded this conversation in mid-October of 2024. And in this conversation, we talk a little bit about the topics we're going to be exploring in our classes, including beauty as ballast, grief as guide, and body as sacred land. Those are the 3 topics we'll be exploring on these upcoming Sundays. And we'd love to invite you to join us. You're welcome to come live. You're welcome to sign up and just access the recordings if you like. And after we go into these 3 topics, we explore a topic that's really dear to both of our hearts, and we've been talking about this together for many years, which is known as the 5 Vows of the Great Turning, sometimes also known as the 5 Commitments of Active Hope. And because these vows, these commitments, exploring them as we've used all kinds of metaphors as a compass, as a rudder to help us steer, as a sail to help us, navigate these strong winds of these times. We get into a little conversation about the 5 vows, and we hope this is just really heartening to you as it was to us to connect about ways to orient during these times. So we're going to be offering a course on the 5 vows and a lot more in January. We've also got some wonderful guest teachers. Leilani and I will be your main guides, and we're going to be welcoming the wonderful poet Rosemary Watola Tromer, the wonderful writer and earth-loving Buddhist teacher and dear friend Cynthia Jors. We're going to be welcoming soul activist, psychotherapist, ritualist, and writer Frances Weller, my very dear friend. And also, we're excited to be welcoming Lydia Violet Hartunian, who is also a Work That Reconnects facilitator and the founder of the School for the Great Turning. And we're inviting each of them to speak about um, certain aspects of these five vows we'd like to explore. But we hope that just beginning to name these commitments and to name these realms of beauty and grief and the body as sacred doorways through which we can show up courageously and wholeheartedly with whatever's happening around us. Um, we hope it gives you heart. We're hoping this conversation feels like a friendly hand reaching out to let you know you're not alone and we're in this together, and there are ways we can show up courageously, beautifully, compassionately, wholeheartedly to meet these times in our lives. We hope you enjoy this conversation as much as we did. And if you'd like to find out more about our upcoming class, you can go to our website, which is embodimentmatters.com, and look on our events page. We've got sign up links there for the series we're calling Take Heart. And that includes Beauty as Ballast, Grief as Guide, and Body as Sacred Land. And very soon we'll have listed there all the details about the class coming up in January 2025, focusing around the five vows and how we embody the great turning toward a more life-giving way of being human. Thanks so much for listening. And I also want to point you to my dear friend Leilani's podcast, which is called Turning Season. We're both posting this simultaneously on Embodiment Matters podcast and on the Turning Season podcast. And you can find out a lot more about Leilani there too. She's wonderful. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoy the episode. And as always, you'll find out more at embodimentmatters.com. Thanks for being here. If this touches your heart, please leave a rating. Please share it with other people you think may benefit. We really hope it is of help during these times.
Hi, Erin.
Hi.
Should we take some beauty as ballast? We could
Yes,
start with some beauty.
I love that. Want to start?
Sure. Um, Yesterday I sat by the LA River with two friends and my kids, and I learned actually that the LA River was um, classified as a storm drain at some point, but then some artists and kayakers kayaked the whole thing. And once a waterway is navigable, it changes its classification. So it became a river, and that changed whether it could be protected and funded in different ways, which was beautiful to me. Yeah, and then we sat there, and there's all this greenery growing, and there was little crawfish and herons and birds, and we hung out and sang, and my son ran around with the dog on this like concrete channel of a river right next to the freeway, and it was totally beautiful.
Mm, it's gorgeous. I love that. That's so interesting about the river too.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't that cool? I want to look into that history.
Mm. Well, I'll say one that is most strongly present for me is I'm here visiting my baby nephew, who is just about 6 months old, and I, for the second time in 2 days, I had him in my arms, his little cozy, warm body, falling asleep, his head, those little snuffly baby falling asleep sounds, and could just sniff his head and his smoothest little cheek and his tiny hand just resting on my chest. And oh, just to sit and, you know, dopamine, oxytocin, whatever it is. I was feeling it all the way just to be in this rest state with this sweet little boy.
So good.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, lucky him too.
So happy.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So should we talk about our themes for
Yeah.
our series?
Yeah. So starting with beauty as ballast, I mean, I think that one thing I would just want to name right away is that it's a lot. It's heavy and difficult to be present with so much of what's happening in the world right now. And I'm frequently hearing some version of like, if you know what's going on, if you're paying attention to what's going on, how can you not be fill in the blank, in despair, paralyzed, overwhelmed, giving up already, enraged, and a lot of course, there's a lot of feelings that are real and intelligent and important. And I think we hold together kind of that deep ecology, teaching of Joanna Macy, that the outrage and the grief and the fear and the worry and even sometimes the numbness, they have a function and they have a purpose and they're worthy. But the despair, I think, and the feeling of like, well, why try? And it's not worth it. That's where I feel like, oh, but wait, I mean, even if I touch those places, I don't want to stay there. And I don't think we have to stay there. So that's what I wanted to name first. And like, why are we turning towards beauty? Because we might not be noticing beauty first and foremost when we look out at what's going on in the world.
Right. Yeah, I always think of and appreciate that image from Rick Hanson, neuroscientist, meditation teacher, about our brains being oriented like Teflon for the beautiful, positive, easy, nourishing experiences like the nonstick pan, and like Velcro for what's scary and would cause despair and outrage. And I do think it's, as we know, because we're doing our second offering about grief, it's so important to make room for both. And because of that negativity bias, feels extra important to make that effort to just get a little more permeable to what is beautiful. I love that as ballast and as nourishment to keep participating, to be able to stay open-hearted during times like these. Yeah, and it is abundant, whether it's herons at the river or a little baby head I can sniff. Uh,
Yeah. And even, I mean, even in pop culture and even in politics and even in like these strange places where we might not think of finding soul nourishment, there's just so, to me, every expression of human creativity or beauty making or community or taking care of each other, those are moments of beauty that can feed me. And it's like both, right? We need that beauty to feed us and keep us strengthened, but also we need those good things to live for, to like care about.
right. Yeah. Mm. I'm so excited we get to delve deep into that because it is amazing. I often feel like in practicing with turning toward beauty, and like it's so easy to miss. It's right there and it changes everything when we really come into felt relationship, reverent relationship with it. And it's so easy to just let it slide right off that nonstick pan of our brain and just miss,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's so easy to miss. And I don't want to miss it.
miss it either.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. I have found and it's not just like grief and beauty, which we're focusing on, but more and more like I find I don't have a taste for things that are only one, that aren't in the
Hmm.
stretch of both. Like if it's just you should be outraged and it's awful and we should be grieving, you got to bring the beauty. But if it's only the beauty and what's good and reverent, feel like, oh my God, we've also got to reckon with what's challenging. And I think being in that stretch of both of those with community is just one of the most nourishing, sanifying things in my.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, nourishing and makes me feel whole and um it just feels truthful. You know,
Mhm.
what either one without the other feels
Yeah.
um yeah, like we're not telling the whole picture. I mean,
Mm.
even as, you know, as you talk about having this beautiful baby in your arms, like I think babies, especially children, but especially babies, for so many of us, we think about the future when we see or love or see someone else loving a baby. I hear that a lot
Mm.
from parents and grandparents and yeah, I feel that too. And it's like the beauty and whatever other emotions might come with that fear or grief are so present together. They're so linked. And the greater the love, the greater those other feelings might be.
Right. Yeah, do you want to go back to, I know you started to mention about understanding grief as holding a sacred intelligence, that it's, of course, important to not block the pain we're feeling. As we're recording this, there's just been massive hurricanes and tornadoes and fires and what else? I'm sure I'm missing all kinds of
War.
war. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, all kinds of violence and
Yeah.
heartbreaking situations unfolding, and we don't want to block, right? The
Right.
body soul sense that like this is awful, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a daily navigation for me of like, we don't necessarily have a choice about how much of the difficulties and heartbreaks in our personal and family and community lives to open up to. Like it's there, whether we feel ready for it or not. But when it comes to news that's far away, we have some decision making about like how much we watch and how much we read and how much we pay attention. And um yeah, it's a navigation of like because I personally I don't want to read or watch these videos of devastating things if I can't actually um, really take it in and care about what I'm watching. And there comes a point where I'm like overwhelmed, and then I have to go a little bit hard to it and be a little bit numbed to it because I can't take anymore. Right. So I just wanted to name that before saying how grief is an intelligence because there is also a capacity for any individual human um, system, human nervous system to like carry the load of that intelligence. But yeah, grief as a kind of intelligence of the whole system because we're all interconnected, spiritually, biologically. It's a fundamental part of the way things work. And if we're in a whole system called life on Earth that's always interacting with itself, this is the incredible pivot of Joanna Macy's teachings as then the human emotion is a part of the system. It's a part of how the system maintains balance, like feeling pain when you're injured, and that makes you change what's happening to your body. Feeling grief when we see a forest burning down alerts us to something being off in the system. And so we don't want to block that intelligence. We don't want to belittle it or pathologize it or ignore it or numb it away. Because we need it to tell us that something's really wrong, like really wrong.
Hmm. And there's some kind of magic about holding it communally, I find, I think like I remember one of the first Work That Reconnects workshops I did some years ago. People were scared, like, oh my God, we're going to do this part where we name the pain we feel for the world. And the image came up in our time together that someone said, I felt like we were going to face the monster of, military industrial growth, capitalist, all of the systems that we're in, and that we would turn to stone as if looking at Medusa, like, it's just much. They said instead, what happened was we looked it right in the face together and we came alive. Like, you feel so much like I'm not alone in this. My grief, worry, pain, whatever is not a pathology. I'm always like delighted that it continues so often to emerge that way, that there's a surprising joy in holding that together, the way it's so enlivening. I'm not going to remember it correctly, but I was just listening to Ross Gay again, reading a quote from his Book of Delights, and it's his piece about joining our wildernesses, joining our sorrow, and what if that is actually joy, holding it
Mm.
together. Surprisingly, it turns out to be true.
Yeah, surprisingly, right? Every time it's like more, maybe it's all the energy that we're no longer using to, you know, hold stuff it down, but it's also just the being in it together um, does seem to bring us more alive. And I love that image of like Medusa, and this sort of like, oh, well, we will be,
It will
it,
kill us
it
if
will,
we
yeah,
face it,
we
right?
can't. And turning to stone too, it's like so much like the numbness as way to survive, right? Just like we'll stop feeling anything if we look at this thing that makes us feel so much. But I'm remembering the photos you posted recently of you and your grief ritual companions looking so happy, and that quote of like, we're
Surprisingly
happy
delightful.
because we cry a lot.
Yes. Oh, I just got the head chills when you said that. Like, ooh, it really is true. Yeah, I'm so happy to trust that.
Hmm. How did you come to trust that going into and feeling that grief would lead to that
Well,
kind
I
of
would say,
joy?
first, wise people suggesting that might be the case. And so, okay, maybe I will dare, but I guess doing it often enough, with people being in grief ritual space or work that reconnects where we're in the honoring or pain phase. Yeah, it's hard, it's deep, I'm not delightful the entire time, I want to say. Like, it's griefy, it's heavy. And I guess I just had enough experiences. Like, it wants to move. It knows how to move if we can stop blocking it. And when we let that happen, there is so much life force and there's so much satisfying communal, um like, what we're missing in modern culture in our siloed, hyper individual, separate lives, to be together in that deep feeling space with so much kindness and respect that just is like, I don't know, what a gift. It really buoys the heart. And I don't know, it's almost like so many of these things, I'm still surprised and not surprised. Like, oh, here we are in this joyful other side of letting it move through.
Hmm.
I don't know if I've shared this quote before, but many years ago I found this in a Wendell Berry poem. I was on a meditation retreat and I was reading this poem, and he said something like, "Their eyes, having grieved all grief, were clear." And I was like, wow, I want to do that. Like, I had some
Mm.
intuitive sense of like, if I get to the other side of letting myself grieve this, I could have that kind of, you just imagine how your eyes feel like washed clean. We see the world
Hmm.
rightly. But as I said at the end of this recent grief ritual, in the world today, that having grieved all grief lasts approximately 5 minutes
Uh-huh.
until life moves and hello.
Right.
So having a way to, like, rinse and repeat and welcome.
Hmm.
Um, And what we're talking about is particularly this grief we feel for the state of the world, for the
Hmm.
state of things, you know, um, to keep
Yeah.
meeting that and letting it guide us, as we say, grief as guide.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the courage to the courage to meet it really comes from doing it together. And so just yeah, I'm just wanting to say that as encouragement that
Yes.
I I still find a tendency in myself to try to bear it alone first and then remember
Hmm.
like, oh yeah, I should like reach out and be in connection with this and then find that revelation again. Oh, it's so much easier and more life-giving when I reach out. Especially, I mean, one-on-one for sure, but especially in a group. There's something about that that's just transformative.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How about you?
Interesting that.
Yeah. Hmm.
I think also, giving the advice the benefit of the doubt, like, okay, this is the process. I'll try it, and having that experience. But I do remember one really potent time that I felt the truth of that, and it was when I read the deep adaptation paper, and I felt like, yeah, I felt really close to despair, and it felt bottomless.
Mm.
It felt like there was a chasm opening up underneath me, and I just wasn't I didn't know how to cope with it. I mean, I know I'm not alone in that because it's may, maybe the first, maybe the only scientific paper to open up with, if you need psychological support after reading this paper, here's some resources. Um, but I reached for the group of Work That Reconnects facilitators that I was attending a monthly group with at the time and said, does anybody want to talk about this paper together? And a few did. And when we did, there that's when there was a bottom. Like it was still deep, it was still painful, but there it was no longer bottomless. I really felt almost like together we made a net under there and that I could land into. And I have carried that with me, that assurance that like, yeah, but even the scariest moments, um, when you face them together, it's different.
Mm. So true.
Yeah. And we're still, when it comes to this pain for the world, we're still, I think, a lot of times trying to grapple with it alone.
Yeah. Thank goodness we don't have to
We don't have to.
do it alone.
So many people care.
So true. Hmm. And then we're exploring body as sacred
Yeah,
escape. Let's get into that. I know we could talk about that for hours.
we could.
Want to start?
Body is sacred land. I mean, I'm just endlessly, this is also beauty for me, I guess. I'm endlessly fascinated and in love with how our bodies are little planets and the earth is a big body
Mm.
and and how the dynamics of breath and flow and stagnation and what's life-giving and what's too much extraction and what's pleasurable and that all of that is playing out on our body landscapes and playing out on the big body of the earth.
Mhm.
And you might be able to pull up some quotes. I can't think of any at the moment, but there's many wise people who've said, the way we treat our bodies is the way we treat our earth, the way our culture treats women is the way we treat the earth, right? And we're seeing these parallels. And so I feel like any turning toward deep awareness of our bodies and deep care for our bodies is immediately reparative for what we're doing
Mhm.
to the earth. How about you?
Well, I'm just thinking right now about how my sense, when I started doing what I would call now body-based practices more than embodiment kind of practices, it was very much in the domain of individualism and taking care of this separate self and this history and these shoulders and this breath, which of course is important. Um, but I so appreciate the deeper and deeper I go into my own embodiment, it is so woven with the web of life and just that understanding of our non-separateness, like as you said, um, there's this quote of Kathleen Dean Moore's that I love so much where she says, I won't get it exactly right, but something like, you could take out my eyes and I would still live. You could cut off my hands, my nose, my legs. I could still live. But if you take away the air, I'll die. If you take away the trees, the waters, the plants and animals, I'll die. And so, why would I think just this body is more a part of me than all of that, And that's such a mind blow, and it's so true. It's like, wow, how have we been led to think of ourselves as so separate and the ways that we treat the animals, the plants, the air, the tree, all of that is just as you said, how we are also ending up treating ourselves and babies, you know, like, and the others. So, yeah, I love that we're calling it sacred land or sacred landscape. And I think of, I guess Wendell Berry's with me today, another beautiful Wendell Berry quote when he says, there is no unsacred land. There's only sacred land and desecrated land. And likewise with the sacred land of our bodies,
Mhm.
and how do we come into that kind of reverent relationship with life? Whether it's the little planet and the big body or know, all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that comes up for me when we say sacred land, of the body is just wow, the depth of judgment and dissatisfaction that we can have with our bodies, whether it's appearance or function, health or illness or unreasonable ideas of what beauty is, that there's something desecrating about our cultural messages about the body just from the get-go. And so hearing you say, yeah, in the beginning I was thinking about my breath and my shoulders and this and that, and then it expands. I think there's some necessary healing of our
Yes.
relationships to our own sacred landscapes before we even have the capacity to expand that care outward.
Mhm.
But if we can notice that it's a miracle to be breathing, that it's a miracle to be uh, taking in food and turning it into flesh and energy, and to be mixing air and food and making words with whatever invisible mind and spirit is behind. Like, that's just amazing. And if I can be amazed at it in myself or in my child, just for a moment, maybe I can be amazed at it in you as well. And maybe I can notice that the people, in wider and wider circles out from me are also miraculous and sacred and precious and to be cared for and protected. Um, and I have to feel that for myself
Mhm.
to I think I haven't seen that it works any other way, that like if you can't really revere the sacredness of your own body in that way, how can you really do it outward? And this is again just like the grieving, it's not done. I look in the mirror and think negative things sometimes for a while before I remember, like, wait a second, I don't want to look at myself through those eyes. What
Mhm.
about the miracle of it? That's like I said, it's deep. What would it be like to look in the mirror and not be first assessing for, like, is anything wrong in there?
Right.
Let me just check if anything's wrong.
Mhm.
And those little switches, I think, those little flips and pivots, and when we feed ourselves and when we get a massage or do acupuncture or do a body-based practice, like what if we're not fixing anything that's wrong? What if we're loving something sacred? And if that's what we're doing with our bodies, what if that's what we're doing in the garden? And what if that's what we're doing, you know,
Mm,
in the wider and wider circles?
so beautiful. Honoring and supporting life.
It's
Yeah.
life right here. Look at that. We're alive. Back to beauty. We're circling back around to beauty.
I love that. They just keep feeding each other, don't they?
Yeah.
I'm so excited we get to delve into these. Do you want to talk about our 5 vows that we're going to be
Yeah.
exploring? I'm
Yeah, let's
really
do
excited
that.
about this. Yeah. So these 5 vows are articulated in a few places. I discovered them in that Coming Back to Life book by Joanna Macy and Molly Brown. And they're called there the 5 vows of the Great Turning. And I've also seen that they're included in the Active Hope book and called the 5 vows or 5 commitments of active hope, which I
Hmm.
thought, great, we can name them however we like. And I have such gratitude for Joanna articulating these. I know her story of only 5 fingers, just, see if we can articulate 5 vows that people might come into relationship with as a guidance to be in just that kind of sacred relationship we were talking about with life and the
Hmm.
body, and
Hmm.
not as heavy vows to beat ourselves up with when we're imperfect, because of course we are, but just as a like an anchor or a guide to keep returning to. I love these. Um, I have them taped on the wall in a few different rooms in my house as a reminder in case despair and stress creep in, to just remind myself how I can show up, however it is. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Reminders, not like vows we can keep or break or um, fulfill or fail to fulfill, right? But we played with all these different metaphors for how the vows can serve us as like a rudder to help us steer and as a compass to help us even figure out which direction we're going for orientation and also as ballast, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, and I also love the story of when Joanna first articulated these, they had just done a work that reconnects immersion at a Buddhist center and had just gone through the spiral of the work that reconnects. So kind of like we just did not exactly the spiral, but gratitude and grief, and then the opening to this connection with our bodies and the earth. And then everyone's in the phase of going forth. And a monk at the retreat center, I believe, asked her, "And now will you have people take vows?" And she said, "That's not really something I do." And he said, "Oh, well, that's too bad because I find they're really helpful." And
Right.
and just like, right, because when we do come around and we know we're going to have to go back to our regular lives, we've come around to some clarity, but then we're going to go into the very disorienting, distracting, busy lives that are outside of this space. What do we have to hold in our hands, or, one on each finger to walk around with to help stay oriented? And yeah. So, do you want to read the first vow?
I would love to. I vow to myself and to each of you to commit myself daily to the healing of our world and the welfare of all beings. I love that. I love that it's like what I notice, even just reading it right now, like it pulls attention out of competing or trying to like what Francis Weller would call secondary satisfactions, like really investing in my self-image and my, these ways modern culture is oriented in pretty unsatisfying ways, but to commit toward healing. I want to participate in healing and the welfare of all. I think that's so beautiful.
Yeah, and just
Imper
imperfectly, yeah, to in some way daily to be to remember again when I forget
Mhm.
that I'm oriented toward the healing of our world and the welfare of all beings. And it's a helpful question, I think in when we do have moments that we can choose one way or another, does this feel like it's in support of the healing of our world?
Right.
Worth asking. Maybe the answer won't be clear, but worth asking.
Yeah, it's beautiful. You want to read the second?
I vow to myself and to each of you to live on earth more lightly and less violently in the food, products, and energy I consume. I know you have an addition you like to include in that vow.
I often include, in my relationships, both inside myself and with other beings also, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
more lightly and less violently, like we were talking about with the body, right? With ourselves and just dissolving the separation. Because I think it's quite possible to try to live more lightly and less violently on quote unquote the earth
Right.
and then be very critical of ourselves or aggressive toward others
Absolutely.
about what that means.
Yes. That's so important. Yeah. So expanding to include inner and
Yeah.
outer relationships to me feel
Yes.
really important. Even the language we use.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think even for me, although I think less violently is helpful for orientation, right? Because we can try to be less violent a lot sooner than we can try to be 100% regenerative and sustainable and biodynamic and peaceful. We can just at least try to be less violent. But I'm also, I think, more internally, I'm orienting toward living more lovingly or with more loving kindness
Hmm.
or with more care, whatever word, because that's helpful for me, I think, more than trying to be less something. I'm like, well, what is the more caring way to do this? Yeah.
And I just have to say, I already love the way we both are messing with these vows.
Uh-huh.
We're in relationship with them of like,
Yeah.
it brings this to life for me. I really love more lovingly with more attention and care. Yeah, it's beautiful. Should I go for the third?
Yeah. Let's hear it.
My favorites. I mean, they all are, but this one's been with me strongly. I vow to myself and to each of you to draw strength and guidance from the living earth, the ancestors, the future beings, and our siblings of all species. Mm, I'm so moved every time.
Hmm.
And every time um, I come back to this recognition. And this one I really appreciate, even if it's an aspiration, that it's worded as a vow to be in that kind of reciprocal relationship. So we're already committing to healing, less violence, and and what do I want to say? I like the way this undercuts how I might think about it, that I could tune into the earth and the ancestors when I'm stressed out and I need to, or when I get really disconnected. But this isn't a remedy for your baseline being a disconnect. It's like the baseline relationship is to draw strength and guidance from the living earth, the ancestors, the future beings, and our siblings, those wise teachers of all species. Like, wow, it still
Hmm.
blows my mind. What if I was living this vow more
Hmm.
fully? I mean, I keep shifting my life, but it
Yeah.
really moves me so deeply that it's possible to really live in that deep reciprocity.
I love that. And I've heard you hear the vow and be moved in that way. And like every time I'm also moved again when you say, not just if I'm stressed out, not just if I get confused,
Mhm.
but I will keep doing this. I will keep this relationship alive and I will draw strength and guidance. And I think one thing that comes for me in work that reconnects practice, another one of those, oh yeah, I remember again things is my loyalty is not only to the people who are alive with me right now and might think I did a good job or not. Because I could think about that
Mm.
a lot when I'm going about my day or deciding a new project. Like, is this person going to be happy with this? Is this person going to be upset with this? And that can matter, but that's not my only and maybe not even my primary loyalty. I don't know, that word is feeling alive to me. Like I have a lot of loyalty to the living earth, to the ancestors, to the future beings, to my siblings of all species. And I want their guidance and we can give each other strength.
Mm. That's so beautiful. I'm thinking of Rowan White, who is my seed keeping teacher, who talks about this language really landed in me and I carry it in my heart. But the possibility of living our lives as a love poem, she says, to the future. But also all these other, what we're saying, our siblings of all species and the ancestors and the
Mm-hmm.
earth. Isn't it beautiful that
It's
we can,
so beautiful.
even when shit is hitting the fan, we can show up and participate?
Yes,
That um, commitment, that possibility moves me so deeply.
me
Mm.
too. Okay, vow number 4. I vow to myself and to each of you to support you in your work for the world and to ask for help when I need it.
Mm. Yeah, that we're not in it alone.
We're not in it alone, and I promise to ask for your help. That's
That's
like,
another one. Like, oof, that
yeah,
a thing, doesn't
that's
it?
revolutionary.
Mm.
And it reminds me of uh, the Buddhist notion of sympathetic joy too, like joy in your joy, satisfaction in your work. Like when your work goes well, that's we're in it together. We're allies in this whole endeavor to commit ourselves to the healing of the world and welfare of all beings. So I vow to support you in your work.
It's so beautiful. I'm just struck all over again how I know we both, like, what do I want to say? Have a lot of time in communities where this is how we're oriented. And I sometimes forget when I hear from people like how rare it is. Like when I said about the first vow, like, we're not here to compete with each other or
Yeah.
prove anything to ourselves. Let's together turn toward healing. And I just love what you said about sympathetic rejoicing in the good work each other is doing.
Hmm.
Um, and the way all of this just keeps softening that conditioning about the separate self, the hyper individualism, like it's all up to me. And when I think it's up to me to save the world, you know, it's pretty overwhelming. It's too
Yeah.
heavy weight to bear. But
Hmm.
when we remember the big we and keep kindly inviting others into the we that's turning toward healing, so much is possible.
So
Mm.
much is possible. And it's very fortifying to me. This is a kind of beauty as ballast for me when I look at there's that Mr. Rogers quote that's been circulating lately of like, look for the helpers when something really bad happens, right? Look for the helpers. And that is a wonderful thing to say to children. And it's a wonderful thing to say to myself because I really do take a lot of heart in when things are awful, just seeing who's responding with some kind of care and
Mhm.
noticing the many ways people can show their care. I love that part. That part of reading the news is really, yeah, it does me a lot of good.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Mm. Okay, fifth one. I vow to myself and to each of you to pursue a daily, and here is where I always want to remove the word spiritual practice, a daily spiritual practice, a daily whatever kind of practice that clarifies my mind, strengthens my heart, and supports me in observing these vows. And I think I take that out because I had one woman in a workshop once saying, what if my practice is walking my dog on the trails? Like that is my practice that clarifies my mind, strengthens my heart, and, bolsters me to participate. It's like, yeah, whatever practice helps
Hmm.
us
Yeah.
resourced to keep participating, even if it's a rest practice, right? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
mm,
I think, yeah, what is inspiring to me and aspirational some days about this vow is that it's a daily practice. And again, it's like not something I do because I'm out of whack and I need to come back to it. I daily do some type of practice that clarifies my mind and strengthens my heart and
Mhm.
supports me in observing these vows. For me, it's not always the same practice either. We're going to explore this, I think, a lot of like different kinds of practices. And, you don't have to do the same thing every day for it to be a practice, right? I have different Qigong forms that I might do and different styles of meditation that I might do. And sometimes I write, the writing is the practice. But it's a daily something
Mhm.
and maybe this is there's not really a good word for it, right? I like the descriptor, clarifies my mind, strengthens my heart. I would say keeps my sense of interconnection alive, tends to that sense of being part of a greater web,
Mhm.
whatever the word is for that, a practice that does it.
Mhm. It's beautiful. You know what I'm thinking of right now too is a teaching that I treasure so much, which comes from Stephen Levine, who someone asked him how he became so kind because he was such a heartful, compassionate, incredible being. And I think about this all the time. He said, by noticing how unkind I was.
Mm.
How do we be in relationship with the vows? Probably by noticing, oh, I'm out of alignment with this. I'm out
Ah.
I'm at over here. That's not bad. And we're not orienting toward these as if there's some outer authority or model of perfection and we're shamey in relation to it. But really to let it be just an orientation toward learning and staying participatory. And the line is here for me from this poem by Aurora Levins Morales, where she says, "Don't let despair sink its teeth into the throat with which you sing." Like,
Mm.
how do we keep making those moves so despair doesn't get to sink its teeth into any part of us, so that we can continue to participate and continue to show up for life. And
Hmm.
I find it so heartening, like, oh, I'm lost. I'm feeling, you know, it's feeling heavy today. Like, okay, I vow to draw strength from the living earth. Like, okay, let me open up to this possible connection. Right. As you said, I don't know what to do about this decision. Oh, what would be more lightly, less violently, more lovingly way to respond? Not to be perfect,
Hmm.
but find our way through these times that by all signs look like it's going to be hard and getting harder in certain ways with these kinds of natural, quote unquote, natural disasters, human caused natural disasters. I think of, yeah, just that the rattling in culture at the same
Hmm.
time as it's in the natural world. We need something to keep orienting and
Yeah.
stay, you know for each other, for our kids, to not just be like, yeah, we're screwed.
Hmm.
Forget about it. Like, no,
Yeah.
we can still live as a love poem toward
Yeah.
the future, toward each other.
Toward each other and just turning toward interconnection. I mean, I think we know from human history and human present that as things get hard, one option is to say, okay, how am I going to protect me and mine and define mine however you do? But that's not the only option. We don't have to respond to hard times like
Mhm.
that. We could here's five more options for how to respond.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so glad these exist. I feel like something to hold on to,
Hmm.
And here we go again. Compass,
Yeah.
rudder,
Hmm.
sail,
Hmm.
anchor, Yeah, all of that. A map, not exactly a map. Mhm.
Yeah. But a guide in some way, like not a maybe it's the course even. It's like the river that we want to be. It's which waterway we're trying to move within.
Right.
Yeah. Can we
Mm.
take a minute to talk a little bit more about shame and perfectionism? We kind of touched it a couple times, but I just feel like it's worth.
Yeah. Do you want to start? I know I talked about it just a minute ago, so I'd love to hear what you want to say.
Well, as we're talking about this, I'm hearing the shadow. I brought it up about the second vow, right? Of how we can be judgmental against ourselves and about others, about living not lightly and not less violently, right? Like looking for the contrast and being all judgmental about it and uptight and even almost like drawing lines, like you're with me or you're against me based on how well you adhere to this principle. And I nod and, open my heart to the care that's underneath that, that's got maybe a quality of desperation of like, we have to stop doing what we're doing to the water and the soil and the animals, because I feel that too.
Mhm.
But I can't think of a time that shame and guilt has produced like an enduring reorientation toward a loving way of life. Like it might stop somebody briefly from something that's harmful, but I just, it seems to shrink us. It seems to divide us. It seems to make us preoccupied with ourselves and whether we're doing the best possible thing or not. And so maybe I'm just adding a little, addendum here of like, and I vow to turn toward these vows in a compassionate way to myself
Not
and
a
to everyone
fundamentalist
else,
way. Yeah. No fundamentalism about it, right?
Yeah.
I think that's so important. And that, like, where we're coming from is it's already decided that you are sacred land, you are worthy of respect, and we're each imperfectly finding our way. And it can be so beautiful when we come together without letting those suffering, tight, worried parts of ourselves take over with shaming us and each other about it. And you're so right, it doesn't lead to an integrated shift. But like, what are those questions or those ways of approach where possibilities can sprout? Like, oh, this is possible, instead of the top down dominating, you should be like this, we're not going to do that.
Not interested in doing that. We want all the good things to sprout. Water the good seeds, as Thich Nhat Hanh would say.
I really like what you said about an additional, I mean, maybe that's part of adding to the second vow more lovingly. Um,
Hmm.
because it's hard. The truth is there's no waking up in these times. We're all entwined with harmful systems. How we eat, how we are communicating with each other on Zoom right now, like
Oh,
nothing
yeah.
is perfect. There's no way to not be participating in this interesting world we were born into that keeps
Yeah.
evolving in certain directions. So, how to, gosh, bow to that fact with
Hmm.
great humility and care,
Hmm.
and not that hardness
Yeah.
of comparing
Yeah.
ourselves to some imagined perfection that certainly I can't tell that it exists
Yeah.
anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
I heard Joe Brewer talking about how, we're actually made of industrial agriculture. Like our actual bodies, we would not have this many human beings on the planet without industrial agriculture. My existence is, it's not just my day-to-day existence using the computer and driving a car and buying things wrapped in plastic that's entangled with this system. It's like I probably wouldn't be here. The idea of interbeing and interdependence, like it's with everything about this moment. And when I first heard him say, or I don't know if he said it in this way, but it gave me this image of my body being made of these products of industrial agriculture. It felt really yucky and discouraging. But it's shifted for me to be quite almost liberating. It like takes a weight off because I'm anybody that I might judge or that might judge me. It's like, look, there's no out. I think
Right.
you were saying this too, but
We're on the
there's
hook.
we're on the hook. There's no way you're going to live so much less lightly and so much less violently that you're not entangled with
Right.
something that isn't working for life on earth.
Right.
We're here, we wake up inside of it. And so, how do we move?
Right.
How do
Yeah.
we move with more care?
I keep thinking of this story, it just keeps coming up, so I'm going to share it, which is, gosh, it was a long time ago. I was listening to a podcast of Tara Brach, and she was talking about racism, and in her Sangha, grappling with race and the way that in many Buddhist communities, especially at that time, um, people were quiet and didn't really participate or say anything about dismantling, white supremacy culture and addressing racism. And she shared that there was a woman, an African American woman in her Sangha who wrote a letter expressing like her own reckoning with that and the lack of participation coming from her spiritual community. I remember I was doing dishes in my kitchen and I was kind of bracing, like, oh God, she's going to read this letter and here comes this woman is going to like shame us. Like, I was ready to, oh, I'm braced for it. It's going to come and it's deserved because, we haven't done enough about this. And it just almost makes me weep right now to say it that what the woman said was, your voice is missed.
Mm,
There was not an iota of attack and shame, and how much that lets us imperfectly add our voice toward the
mhm,
healing of our world instead of you're a jerk. You know what you said that we've talked about the lateral violence of on the left and people judging each other and canceling each other and
mhm,
that heavy-handed righteous stuff that we're just not interested in doing. And I'm so moved by the tender invitation in, hey, your participation is missed. We would love to have you with us,
mhm. Yeah,
instead of shaming us into it. So
right.
I'm so grateful to share this with you, my dear friend, because I know our hearts are so aligned in that
Mhm.
relational approach. And I love that we get to do that together.
Me
Yeah.
too. Me too. I'm so grateful for it.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you enjoy this podcast, it's great if you want to share it with friends or post about it on social media. Also, you could make a donation to support the podcast or find out more information about our classes and offerings at our website, embodimentmatters.com.